Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Teach, Sleep, Repeat, Bitesize. Hayden, hello.
Hello, you sounded a bit down then. You sounded really like, hey guys, it's like another episode, man, and stuff.
Listen, it's been a blur, Hayden. It's been a blur. We're back. You're back, and I tried to do it on my own. I did do one on my own. I didn't try. I succeeded. You saw or you listened?
I saw, and then I listened to about 10 seconds of it. So
yeah, like most of our listeners, probably. Yeah. Just like, it's just him. What? No, Hayden. All right. So yeah,
got the gist. Yeah, I realised I wasn't in it, and I thought, hang on,
wait a minute.
There's no point.
Wait a second. I was changing poo for the fourth time in a row.
Oh man, do you know what? Listen to our main episode that's coming out in a few days' time, because we'll give you a nice update on the baby situation. There's a reason we look like this.
I was just going to say, I think you can, just anyone who's watching this episode might get a little idea of where we are mentally right now.
I've been trying to shave my head and face for like 3 days. It's such a small task, and I haven't done it. I'm sat here recording a podcast. Apparently that takes importance.
I've been trying to just do this simple job. Yeah. Let's talk for half an hour about it instead of doing it for 2 minutes. How about
that? Anyway, Dylan, go on. Let's get into the episode. So we've got a really quick bite-sized one today. We've got our top 5, I guess, things that you can do, consider before you quit teaching. So, Dylan, do you want to say anything before we dive into our list?
Yeah, I think this is born out of something that we've really both experienced over the years because, again, in a future episode, very close, we've got one lined up that we're going to talk about how much teaching has changed over the years and not necessarily always for the best in terms of well-being, etc., and even outcomes and stuff like that. But putting that aside, it's kind of the theme, I suppose, is a lot of people listening to this will be feeling very similarly, and especially teachers, but I think even people just in their day-to-day jobs. It's not something that is just teachers feel, where we become like disenfranchised and just a bit like, well, why am I doing this? What's the point? And we talk to a lot of teachers, obviously. A lot of our friends are teachers. We've been teaching for the best part of a decade, so we know a lot of teachers, and you guys listening get in touch with us as well. And I think you get to that point where you just think, okay, I'm going to quit. It's enough. I've had enough.
I've been there.
We've been there. We would be lying if we both said that we hadn't previously thought, is it best for us to quit? And
thinking about some of these tips that we're going to say, like I've done a few of these, I think, and it has helped me not just quit. So hopefully it'll be helpful for listeners.
That's the summary before we get into the list for anyone listening. What's this episode going to be about? It's okay. Listen, we're in a point where you're starting to think this profession is no longer what it was, and you kind of want to leave it, but you just have that inkling, that thing that keeps you. Like the reason we're still teaching, Hayden, is because we love so much of it. So here are some really practical steps as to what you can do before you actually take the plunge and quit that might turn a corner and keep you in this career. Because, guys, we need fantastic teachers, and we're losing them left, right, and center. So, Hayden, kick us off. What's the first thing we can do to just get us back on the straight and narrow and stay in the profession before we decide to quit? What's going to help us?
Okay, this one's quite personal to me. You don't have to climb that ladder. You don't have to do it. If you've got responsibilities, maybe you've taken them on already, and you're thinking, I'm overworked, I'm overwhelmed, I'm actually not really enjoying this role, I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, you drop it if you can. Obviously, it's not as easy as that. Sometimes it might take a bit of time to phase out of that role, but don't be afraid to do that. Your happiness is so much more important than kind of that cultural push of, you've got to work up. But are you not a head teacher yet? You've been teaching for 10 years. Are you not head of year yet? What are you doing? Ignore it. Just put your happiness first and do the thing you enjoy. I did that years ago. I've absolutely thought I have to be, especially as a male teacher, there's that male culture as well. I was like, well, I've got to be a head of year in 3 years. Then I've got to go and do this phase leader role. And I've got to be a head teacher, right? And after a few years, I realized I just didn't want to do that. And it made me feel really down. But actually, I got over that hurdle, and I'm happier than ever in my teaching role. And I'm totally content at the teaching level that I'm at. And I don't want to take on any more. I'm happy where I am.
I think what you said is going to resonate with a lot of people, because I've spoken to them. And there really are 2 types of people out there. One who haven't yet taken that plunge and really feel the pressure to do so and feel that they need to do so, but are maybe a bit worried about the workload. And I'm being really honest, for that group of people, a big thing is the pay as well. The amount of money you might get to step up is not nearly, in most cases, remotely representative of the work you'll put in. So it might be, for
Mm.
example, anyone not in the teaching world, it's called a TLR, teaching and learning responsibility. If you're designated as the leader of a year group, you might get £2,000 to £3,000 to do that job. Now, at the end of the month, we're not talking about much. If after tax, we're talking about less than £200 a month, or £100, maybe 100 and something pound.
Yeah.
You can tutor for a bit at the weekend, much less stress, and you can make that same amount of money. So it's just something to consider for that group. And the second group, Hayden,
Mm.
and maybe you can talk about this a bit, because I know we've had experience with this, is people who have taken that plunge and are now miserable, and it doesn't always work out the way it does, because that kind of job satisfaction, it goes out the window because you're doing less of it. You're not in front of the kids as much, right?
Yeah, exactly. You just got to find. I spoke to some really inspirational people over the years who have overcome this hurdle, and I've said, "Oh, do you want to try and go for assistant head or deputy, or do you want to go for headship or whatever?" And they're just like, "Nope," like super content. I'm like, "No, I really like exactly this job role I'm in. I've tried that before, hated it. I got paid a bit extra, great, but really my life was just worse. So no, I'm happy." And I think that's where we need to strive to be. So if you feel like you're overworked and your pride is taken over a bit too much, just try to drop it, try to let it go. You might find yourself becoming a bit more happy in your work. Dylan, number 2.
Yeah, number 2, I suppose it's kind of leading on to that. We're still talking about roles in school. That's very much a hierarchical role of taking on more responsibility and having more pressure. I think something simple, even if you're past that now and you don't want to step up, but you still find yourself in a bit of a rut. Something as simple as changing a key stage, changing a year group that you're teaching, can really make a difference. Now, I know teachers before who've spent the first 3, 4, 5, 6 years of their career stuck in the same year group. And I can imagine that becomes really monotonous, especially when, think about it, by the end of the 3rd year, 4th year, you are teaching the same kind of curriculum and syllabus over and over and over and over again. You might even be in the same sets. If you set for maths, for example, you might be doing the same books. It can become monotonous, it can become boring, and that can kind of eat away at you a little bit. And that can be the cause of some of the kind of desperation to get out. So something as simple as just switching it up, go with younger children. I can't express to you guys, Hayden and I have worked in junior schools. I know Hayden had a bit of a experience in a through school, but we spent the vast majority of our career in a junior school, which you might think, oh wow, year 3 to 6, that's very condensed. There's no early years there. There's no reception, year 1, etc. But the difference between teaching a year 3 cohort and teaching a year 6 cohort is monumental. And I would argue, I would argue that it's a completely different job, and that every single year group, having taught in 3 of the 4, and Hayden, you spent a lot of time in 6, I think it's very safe to say that it is completely different. The children have different personality traits at different times. They're different stages of their life. And Hayden, you've gone, I think, obviously, I know you've worked in year 4, you've worked in year 6. Can you attest to this kind of difference? Why might this help someone making that move?
Well, it's just different. Like, a lot of people go into teaching, I think, because every day is a bit different, right? It is that kind of job where, very opposite to, my previous job was in Tesco, and I just didn't really enjoy it because it was too samey for me every day. A lot of people love that, like, just, exactly what you're getting into each day. But I quite like the challenge of every day is a bit different. And if you're in the same year group for too long, you do that complacency just sort of seeps in a little bit. You don't even realize, and then you become really comfortable. And then you convince yourself that, oh, well, I wouldn't want to change year groups because I know everything like the back of my hand now. But actually, that might be eating away at your enjoyment of the job. And sometimes you just need to kind of like just push yourself out of your comfort zone. But definitely year 4 and year 6, even just 2 years apart, super different. So perhaps you could consider going to a different key stage, even maybe even into secondary. I think, Dylan, you mentioned earlier, didn't you, about a secondary role?
Yeah, I've spoken to people before, and again, it's a kind of conversation you can have for your SLT, because people have feeder schools. Quite often, if you work in a primary school, you know where the majority of your children are going to go when it comes to secondary school, and coming up with like having a role between those links and maybe taking on something where you're working with children who are a bit older and building that bridge between primary and secondary school. Again, it's a new role. Although you're still in the school you're working, and you're still working with the same kind of children because they lead themselves up, you yourself having a different job role, it can just spice it up a bit. I know, Hayden, we're the same kind of person here. Doing the same thing for 2 to 3 years, we just get bored. There's going to be a point where the straw that breaks the camel's back, and you just think, look, I just need a change, okay? And it can be as simple as asking the head, listen, can I try out year 5 next year? I'd love to try year 6. I've been stuck doing this for this long. let's go and try year one. You know, it
Yeah.
might be complete. I might hate it. I might not like it. But you know what? In a year's time, I can do a different year group as well.
Exactly. And if you're sat there right now thinking with this tip, and maybe with the next one you're about to have as well, I can't do this because my SLT will not listen to me. Then they're not a supportive team.
Mm,
Stick around to the end of this little bite-size episode, because tip number 5 is probably going to be the one for you if that's the case.
for
So
sure.
moving on then to number 3. Happy to move on, Dill?
Yeah, definitely. I think it is nice that you're right. This is building up, and I think this is one after the other things you can try. So what's the next thing?
So this one again, there is a similar theme here, but it does start with talking to SLT, because you know what, a lot of people just don't do that step. They get themselves caught in a rut. They assume that no, nothing will fix this. There's nothing I can do. I don't want to be a burden. I'm not going to talk to my SLT because they won't help. They're just going to be like, no, you go where you are. You do this because we've given you the role. But you know what? A lot of people in SLT roles, vast majority, are there because they're good managers and they've experienced that themselves. They will understand. Just talk to them. Have a real conversation with your line manager, whoever that is. And if you need to, go to the governors. You know, there are different levels of people that you can go to, and just tell them how you feel. Because you know what? My experience with people, even if their first reaction is not quite what you wanted, you've planted a seed. I always say that. We've done it many times in our career. We've planted that seed. And then later on, that person, that SLT member might go home, de-stress for the day, lay there at night and think, you know what? I don't really want that staff member to be upset. Maybe I could. Actually, maybe there is a way that we can make that change next year. You just got to have that, be brave, have that conversation. And also be the positive force, that your school needs. Every school needs this big positive pusher, there's someone that's not afraid to just say, yeah, this is what I want. I'm a worker. I'm giving you 50 hours of my time a week. You can listen to me. You can listen to my concerns and hopefully do something about it. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's really powerful. And again, people might be sat there going, what are you on about? I can't do that in my school because X, Y, Z. Trust me, we're going to get there. But for the vast majority of people, we've been incredibly lucky, Hayden. We have a leadership team right now that I'm not afraid to say are fantastic at listening. I really, truly think that has helped my well-being a lot, because I feel like if something is really eating away at me, or we're in a staff meeting and something's suggested, it's very collaborative, and I feel comfortable to say, oh, well, what about this then? If this thing you've introduced right now, that does mean that we have to spend X, Y, Z hours doing that. I mean, what can we do? What can we get in return?
Yeah.
What's going to be the thing where my well-being is placed at number one, rather than the need for something to be introduced at that very second? And that discussion with SLT is really, really, really powerful. And I know a lot of people, again, Hayden, myself included, right? Because I know we can act all bullshit in the podcast sometimes. There's definitely been situations before where I've not liked something, it's been eaten away at me, and I've thought it would be easier just to get over it. And
Yeah.
I've not been able to get over it. And it's really, frustrated me and affected my work-life balance. It's not easy to step out of line almost and say, even with the best of intentions from SLT, to say, oh, that is actually very detrimental to me, and that's not a good decision from my point of view. I want to air that so we can have a discussion. It doesn't have to be angry. It doesn't have to be confrontational from your end. If they make it confrontational, then you can listen to our further steps. But like you said, Hayden, most of the time, opening that dialogue, the trickiest bit is just doing it. Once the dialogue's open, I've never really had a problem.
I will wrap up this point by saying there is a right and a wrong way to do it as well. And I've learned the hard way, haven't I? Dylan's laughed at me over the years because I've quite often done it the wrong way, and it's fine. It's part of life. You learn. And by the wrong way, what I mean is just letting that thing go on a bit too long, letting it eat away at you because it annoys you, not saying anything. And then when you eventually do say something, it's a stroppy email at 7 p.m. A passive aggressive email. It gets you nowhere. It's never gotten me anywhere ever, other than that person just being a little bit resentful of the fact that they want to do anything for me because I've just been really rude. So just get out there, think about the way you want to say something. Do what I do now if you need to. If you're you get riled up quite easily, I'll always send Dylan what I propose to tell this person, and then I'll leave it 24 hours and I'll let him give me some feedback.
But
it works wonders.
It works. You don't even need to have someone to bounce off, do you, really? You can just leave it for 24 hours. But having a good friend, most of you will have someone at school you can bounce off and you de-stress with. Use that person to just read what you're saying. Yeah, because
vet your thinking.
Very quickly on that point, you sent me stuff before where 80% of it was bang on the head. but you'd start off with something which would just set it off on the wrong foot. And that just needs to be taken out, because there's a difference, I think, between a professional dialogue trying to improve well-being and a personal kind of anger. And there's no need for that personal kind of anger. Like,
Sure.
Okay, you disagree with that idea. It's still a good idea, and you don't have to have everything in a school which matches your personal way you think should do things. But you can talk professionally about the outcomes, and I think that's a really good way to differentiate.
So to summarize, tip number 3 then, talk to your SLT, talk to your line managers, but just do it in the right way. Dylan, sure. I think it's over to you now. Is that right? Number 4?
Me, number 4. This is something that we are both really worried about telling you guys, because, let me tell you why. Because we understand the current climate. It's been 2-3 years now, it feels like, since COVID, of furlough, people being laid off, cost of living crisis, energy prices going up. People's wallets are just being tightened and tightened and tightened. So the kind of what I want to do before we say this last tip is just, please listen very carefully to what we're actually saying, because we're not going to pretend like everyone can afford to take a pay cut. However, Hayden and I both did this thing, okay? And, we had tutoring business that helped us to make these decisions, sure, but I do truly think that we would have considered this regardless. And that is to assess your money, assess your take-home pay, assess exactly, sit down and think, what has to go out of my monthly outgoings? What bills do I have that are non-negotiable? What mortgage do I have, or what rent do I have that's non-negotiable? Everything that has to come out of my bank account. Think about everything that kind of needs to. It's kind of that gray area where it's like, okay, I want to be able to go out for dinner once a month. I want to be able to go and see my friends and socialize for a bit. I'm going to put aside that money. I've got children, perhaps, that I need to make sure they get this done, or they have clubs, etc. Just get your own personal bottom line, and there's no one's going to tell you what that is other than you. You decide what is necessary for you and what level you want to stop at. And just look into calculators, work things out where you can really drop some of your responsibilities. And we're talking here about days in school, going part-time. Exactly, going part-time and lose some money, but not as much as you think. Perhaps, Hayden, you could give us some more detail here. Why is this going to help dropping days? I'm going to lose money. Why is that a good thing?
Well, okay, a couple of things, right? Firstly, when people quit teaching, they quite often, statistically, go into jobs that are lower pay anyway, right? Because it can be quite hard to just walk into a job. Let's say you're at the top of the teacher pay scale. It's quite hard to just walk into another job that's of that pay. So before you consider doing that, where you're going to maybe be dropping a bit of pay anyway, just consider doing the same thing, but within the job you're in that you already know really well and potentially love. I know that Lauren's mum dropped down to, I think she's on 0.8.
Yeah.
So, it's not a huge drop, but it was totally manageable for her in terms of finances, given the position she's in her life at the moment and sort of a family income and all that. She could afford to drop to 0.8, and it really, really, really helped her health and well-being, because she had a huge medical issue a couple of years ago, and she just couldn't do full-time teaching anymore. It was just too much. So it was kind of either quit or find a new norm. And the new norm, fortunately, was just dropping a day of the week and just, finding, having a 4-day week. It was manageable for her, and the money was manageable. So, yeah, we're not trying to, we don't want you to think we're sat here being like, oh, money's whatever, just drop a few days, you'll be fine. Like, obviously, people are in different positions where every penny counts, and this might not be the tip for you. But really do think about it, because I think you'll be surprised at how little you lose compared to the percentage drop. For example, we dropped 35%, but we dropped 25% in our pay. So it's
just to clarify, that's 35. We dropped 2 days in school, basically.
Yeah.
So you would think 35 to 40% of our time, but it was nowhere near that in terms of pay, was it? Because of the tax.
No, we didn't lose 35 to 40% of our take-home pay, just because of the way tax works. We won't go into it now, but it really is worth looking into if you possibly can. If you're really at that breaking point and it's a case of going to do a new job anyway, where you might be paid less.
And still maintaining those school holidays. Let's not pretend it's an amazing perk of the job, because it's something that's kept us in the job, Hayden. Having gone part-time was really powerful because 2 reasons. One, school holidays, still maintain them. You still get 6 weeks off. Doesn't matter that you're part-time. You get 6 weeks off in the summer, and you're still part of the teacher pension, and you can still keep the contributions as high as you want. It's a perk of the job. And if you're at that point and you're thinking about quitting, this is a really, really good option for a lot of people.
Right, so we're nearly 20 minutes in. We're going to finish this episode very soon. You've got this far. You might be thinking, cool, I've got a tip or two I can have a go at. You might also be thinking, oh, I can't do any of these because the pay thing doesn't work for me. I can't talk to my SLT because they're just toxic and they won't let me change my role. They're constantly piling on responsibilities anyway. It doesn't happen. I can't drop anything, right?
I suppose you just have to leave, Hayden, right?
Yeah. Leave the school, not the profession.
Oh, the school, not the profession, right?
Yeah. So, the last resort is, and I really, really recommend this, it's probably the biggest one really to do that most people do when it's just not working. Please try to move school before you completely quit this job because it can be such a game changer. And if you don't believe me, just go online for one day. You'll see someone on a teacher Facebook group talking about how they move school and their life is so much better now.
And if you don't believe us, just listen to us because we did this tip.
We did it as well, exactly. And for me, it's interesting actually, just being personal for a second. Two different reasons, really. The first time I left is because I just thought the school was toxic. My well-being wasn't there. I didn't enjoy working there personally. Other people might have done, but it wasn't for me. I didn't gel with the way it was managed, and my workload was horrible. But the second time I left was more of it. It wasn't so much that same relationship. It was more of a recognition of I don't fit here. And I had to be it was really hard because I felt like I was the failure. The school was great and I was the failure. But it's a puzzle and I just wasn't the right piece for that role. They needed someone different with a different skill set, a different way of working. And, I just wasn't there. I wasn't that person, which is why I left. And I was really unhappy there purely because of that I was convinced myself on what am I doing? I can't do this job properly.
You were a round peg in a square box, whatever it's called. You know what I mean? You weren't fitting. Well, I probably butchered that saying, but you were doing all the right things and being an amazing teacher, but the environment, it just didn't gel. And it
just didn't gel. And I have no disrespect to the people. I really respect the people still. I just didn't fit in that role. So yeah, don't be afraid to quit your job and go and get another job in a different school. The beautiful thing of teaching is the biggest perk in the world is it's always going to be around. The population is increasing. There are tons of schools anywhere in the country, that you've got the best opportunity to work kind of where you want and change jobs. It can be hard, don't get me wrong, because you might not be the puzzle piece that fits the school that you're applying for. Doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you're not the piece. So it can take some time, but do really consider moving school before you quit.
Absolutely. Hayden, I think hopefully people can get a lot from that. And that is a really genuine list there that we have taken a lot from ourselves over the years. So, we walk the walk as well. Do try it out. And if you've done any of these things before and it's worked for you, do get in touch with us. Do let us know because it's powerful for other teachers to hear that. Because whatever situation we're all in, there will be someone in your school right now who's going through the exact same thought process. If it's not you, it'll be one of your friends. It'll be someone you know. This is a really tricky job. The profession is tough. It seems like it's just getting tougher, but we love teaching children. We love helping them. So hopefully this list, Hayden, can help someone just stay in the job a bit longer.
Absolutely. And if you want to hear a bit more about how the job is maybe getting a bit tougher and changing, then do make sure you check out our episode later this week. It'll be coming out on Monday if you're listening today on Friday.
And by later this week, you mean next week? Because this
next week, yes. later this 3 days later.
Later this weekend.
Yeah.
Monday's a weekend. Anyway, guys, hopefully you enjoyed that. I'll let Hayden sign off with his tired, scruffy look.
I'll see you in the next episode. Hopefully I'll have shaved my head and beard by then.
Bye.
See you guys.